Well, I want to welcome everyone to our webinar. This is Joe Anderson, Certified Financial Planner, President, Peer Financial Advisors. Thank you so much. We're doing these webinars, trying to get them out once a month to you. Pretty excited here today. Identity theft is a huge, huge problem that we're facing more and more each day. I know a lot of you have concerns with it. So we have Matt Davis. He's with the Identity Theft Resource Center, and he's going to go through a presentation over the next 30-40 minutes. There's a lot of really good information here. I want you to save it. We can go back to it. And I also want to make sure that you are aware of all of the resources that are available if, unfortunately, you ever become a victim of identity theft. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt. And Matt, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, I guess let's start with what is Identity Theft Resource Center, and then we can kind of dive into the presentation.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Joe, and thanks to folks at Pure Financial for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. So let's dive right into it. So the Identity Theft Resource Center is a 501c3 nonprofit. We were formed in 1999 and incorporated as a 501c3 in 2006. We help victims and consumers all over the country with identity theft issues, preventative, proactive education, as well as reactive case mitigation. So we have a call center that handles about 10,000 unique victim cases a year. We have a website that touches millions of people each month, and we also now have an app that you can download for free. And all of our services to the consumer are free, so you can call us anytime if you have an issue, or visit our website for some good information.
That is awesome. So we'll make sure that we get all this information to you. All right, let's dive in.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start with how we meet our mission. We provide no-cost victim assistance to the public through our call center, through our website. We educate industry leaders, consumers, law enforcement, government on the best practices for fraud and identity theft detection, reduction, and mitigation. And we serve as a national resource regarding consumer issues. So I want to dive right in. There's a lot that's thrown around these days about what identity theft is. You hear about it. Most people these days have heard about it. They're aware of this sort of specter of identity theft, but they might not even know what the definition actually is. So we usually start there. And it's very simply just when someone uses your personal identifying information, or PII as we refer to it, for some illegal gain. Now this can be done in a variety of ways. Most people, when we're talking about PII, we're talking about your social security number, your date of birth, bank account information, driver's license information, passport information, anything that can be used for someone else to gain benefit using your information. So that's sort of the basic definition. Anytime it's used for illegal gain, and it can be done a variety of ways. It can be financial, it can be governmental, medical services. There's a host of things that people can do with the right know-how and the right information. So social security number is the big one. Driver's license number, online passwords and login credentials. We'll talk about that. Addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth. That's also a big thing. Not so much independently, but when you
in conjunction with something else.
Exactly. When you have that stuff, and it's important to note also that we put so much public information about ourselves out there these days. So we're going to talk about social media profiles and things like that as well.
So I should carry a wallet with my social security, driver's license, and birth certificate.
No.
Right, you want to keep all of that stuff.
No.
Because in conjunction, one individual item here is not going to hurt you as much, but as soon as they get a little bit more information, I think then that's when it really hurts you.
It's called identity profiling, and the more information that I have about you, the harder it is for financial institutions, for government organizations, for law enforcement to decipher between you and the crook. So this is, the classic view. It usually financial identity theft is what most people think of when you talk about identity theft, and that is, using your social security information to open new lines of credit, loans, mortgages, auto loans, store cards. There's this sort of traditional credit and debit card fraud, which is just, I think most of us have had that happen at some point where someone got a hold of your check card number and, went to town with it. And then, even tenancy and utilities, places to live, cable bills, all sorts of things.
I was, when I graduated college, I went to University of Florida, then I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. I lived in a very small studio apartment.
Yeah.
It was efficiency. I was broke, right?
Right.
And so I got a new checking account, right? And so the bank sent my checks to the wrong apartment.
Yeah.
Right. Same building, wrong apartment. And, back then, people would put their phone numbers, social security number, everything right on your checks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They actually called me.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, I have your checks. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, how nice of you.
Yeah.
But what did they do? They went and wrote checks all over the South. It took me literally probably 10, 15 years to clean all that stuff up. They're writing checks to Kroger, grocery stores, and they knew exactly. Right, they figured out a driver's license. Joe Anderson is a pretty common name.
Yeah, well,
right?
so is Matt Davis. So
yeah, right,
I can relate to you there.
So, this is a big deal. I mean, it screwed up my credit for quite some time.
Yeah. So when you're looking at financial identity theft, kind of here's what we're talking about, right? Some of the things that can happen. I've had victims call me that have actually had to file bankruptcy over an identity theft, which is actually sort of a bad strategy, and we'll get into why that is. Because bankruptcy, as I'm sure you know, involves legally agreeing to responsibility for all these debts that are bundled up in this bankruptcy, right? So once you make a payment on a bad debt, even if it's identity theft, it essentially becomes yours. So bankruptcy is something that does happen because victims will the first thing they think to do is consult an attorney. And if it's not an attorney that has an understanding for identity theft law, sometimes you can get some advice that's not to your best interest necessarily.
So as soon as you pay a bad debt and you're like, this is not mine, but you know what, I just want to get rid of it. I don't want to deal with it, right? And you pay it, and then all of a sudden other stuff pops up. You own it.
You own it. Yeah. You pay 1 red cent to any bill. That is like signing your name on the dotted line saying, I accept responsibility to this. So then we wanted to get in, most people think about financial identity theft as the primary form of identity fraud, and it's the most common, but there are a lot of other things that people can do too. Government accounting issues. I'm sure most of you are aware of, how much trouble the IRS is having right now with identity theft.
Huge problems. I mean, a lot of our clients and a lot of you that are listening now, we get the calls. It's like, well, someone filed my tax return.
Right, and that is a big issue. Government support services. So, jumping from the IRS, you can also go to, do you receive Medicare or Medicaid? Do you have any sort of government-initiated benefit program, from disability to unemployment to, any government-administered benefit program can be hijacked as a form of identity theft. Wage earnings, employment contracts, criminal. That's where someone steals your identity and actually falsely represents themselves to law enforcement. So, you go to...
Again, that happened to me.
Really? Yeah.
Neighbor kid.
Yeah.
He was the black sheep.
Yeah.
Right. And he was my neighbor. I knew him since I was probably, 3 years old. Right. And then we were friends in elementary school, but then he kind of took a different path. I took a different path. Right.
Sure.
And so he got into problems and drugs and alcohol and everything else, but he knew my birth date. He knew my address where my parents lived. Right. He knew my first, middle,
last name. Yeah.
Last name. He gets arrested for DUI.
Yeah.
Right. And then I don't have my license. My name's Joe Anderson.
Right.
Boom.
Right. And with a social security number, that's something that still happens, unfortunately. People who, like you said, that usually involves where you have a friend or a relative or a loved one, most of us do, who at some point made some bad decisions in their life. And now they know if they get pulled over and they give their information, they're going to jail. Or maybe they don't want the criminal history for whatever reason. Who does, right? So they give your information, and usually the victim doesn't find out about it until they're doing a background check.
I did find out. I'm in the industry, so we get a lot of background checks, right?
Absolutely.
And so I got a job. This is before we started Pure Financial Advisors, and then it's like, well, Joe, can you come in? I was supposed to start on Monday, right? They're like, hey, can you come in on Friday?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
I come in, there's a rap sheet. It's like there's child abuse and who are you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's why I had to go to the FBI, get fingerprinted. It is
it's a process.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the unfortunate thing, is usually when people find out about that, it's on the cusp of getting a new job, getting a new place to live, something where someone needs to run your criminal background. And you probably need that background check to go well if you're getting it checked. Most of the time, most people don't just check it just because.
Right.
So, like we discussed on government benefit issues, it can be, false wage earnings, which can hurt you at tax time, Department of Motor Vehicle issues. We talked about the IRS. State tax fraud is also obviously included in there. Any sort of social services or unemployment benefits, those can all be affected. Another thing is medical identity theft. This one's kind of scary because it does involve a financial component, right? You're going to be charged for prescriptions you never ordered, for medical procedures that you never asked for. And it has sort of a scarier component too, in that it can actually augment your medical file. So, God forbid you need your ability to use medical services in an emergency, and they have the wrong blood type listed in your medical file, or they have they don't have it notated that you have a peanut allergy or something like that. So that one can actually be scary on several fronts.
Well, this is all pretty scary.
Yeah.
You're killing me now.
Well, we're going to talk about what to do. So how thieves obtain information. You sort of made a joke earlier, and I want to touch on that. Lost, stolen wallets. Should you carry your Social Security card, your birth certificate, your passport in your wallet or purse? No, unequivocally no. Unless you have a use for it that day, unless you are doing something with it where you need that card, you need that birth certificate for something you're going to do that day. Otherwise, keep it someplace safe where it's less likely to be lost or stolen. I still, in 2016, get 2 or 3 calls a week from victims who say, I lost my wallet and it had my Social Security card. And I have to inform them that if you just left that card at home, losing your wallet would have been a temporary setback. A few weeks, you order new credit cards. It's a pain. Nobody likes to do it, but it's, life goes on. With a Social Security card or a birth certificate in there, you've now given yourself another sort of lifelong issue where you have to constantly be checking to make sure that you're not a victim of identity theft. So there's a lot of other ways. Phishing and scams is a big one. We're going to talk about that. Dumpsters, most of you, if you don't have a shredder, home shredders are really affordable these days. You don't have to shred every piece of mail, but certainly like we've been talking about, everything with a Social Security number on it, bank account information on it, anything that you wouldn't want someone digging out of your trash and using, shred it.
This is big here when it comes to like IRS scams, is that the IRS will never call you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
They will not. And that's the most common scam right now is the IRS phone scam. And scams change every day. When I speak to people in the community about this stuff, I try and focus on the sort of general trends, general tactics that the scammers are always going to use. So right now, the IRS phone scam is the big one, which, as you mentioned, the IRS never calls to collect a debt. But, understand that generally when someone's trying to scam you in a phone scam, they're either going to use the carrot or the stick is how I kind of paraphrase it, which is they're either going to use something to entice you that seems too good to be true, or just something to scare the living daylights out of you to, sort of lower your critical thinking ability so that you'll give them what they want ultimately, which is either, cash or personal information.
And with this is that, all right, so if I'm calling a credit card information, as long as I'm providing or if I'm making that call, that outbound call, then it's okay to give that information. But if they're calling you, never give that information.
That's correct.
Is that a good rule of thumb to live by?
That's a general rule of thumb to live by. Yeah. If they're calling you out of the blue, your bank is never going to call you unsolicited and ask you for your personal information. It's just not a good security practice. Most financial institutions these days know that. So yeah, that is a good rule of thumb. If you're calling out, then it's okay. If they're calling you, if you're calling out and you trust the financial institution or the, service provider that you're talking to, if it's some, online, sales that you found on the internet and you're not sure of, maybe be more cautious there. But if it's a lender or a merchant that you trust, then that's okay. Social networking, we talked about this a little bit. So understand that the information that you share publicly, not everybody on Facebook is your friend, right? And even information that can seem innocuous or harmless on its own, like we talked about, in collaboration with other information or that can hurt you. So it allows them to socially profile you, making a more complete social profile. So the name of your dog or your mom's maiden name on its own might not be a big deal for somebody to have. But now if I have a Social Security number and I have your middle name and I have where you went to high school and I have your last 3 addresses and your travel history, where you work, that is a lot harder for a financial institution or a service provider to pick up on than if all I have is a Social Security number, but I don't know the name that's supposed to be attached to it. I don't know anything else about you. I just have a Social Security number. That's easier these days to catch than I have all this information about you. So keep in mind, any of your social networking platforms, not everybody who's your Facebook friend is actually your friend, and it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, good point. Now, there's a quick story. My mother's maiden name is Anderson.
Oh no,
as well.
That's confusing,
right? And no, they weren't related, right? And so every time they were like, there was a security question back in the day. It was like, well, what's your mother's maiden name? I would say Anderson. And every single time they were like, no, her maiden name.
And you're like, double check.
I know what maiden name means. I know what it means. All right, mobile devices.
Yeah, so mobile devices, most people think of, getting their wallet stolen. They think of locking their door when they leave their homes in the morning. People don't realize that, your mobile device is essentially a computer these days. It's a micro PC. So in many cases, certainly I know is the case for me, there's more personal information on my phone than you could get in all my, personal, hard documents and files and wallet and all that stuff combined. So understand that thieves know that, and your mobile device is a target for that reason. So password protect the physical smartphone or tablet. Most of them have those options these days. Download a data wiping program. So that's, Android and actually the new iPhone platforms come with it. It's built into their factory phone. But if you don't have that, download a data wiping app so that in the event your phone is lost or stolen, you can remotely from your desktop wipe it and it'll go back to its factory settings. So they're not going to get access to your email, your bank, all that other stuff. Download antivirus software. Most people don't think about that. But again, your smartphone is nothing more than a small computer. So if you have antivirus and malware protection on your computer, why wouldn't you also want that for your smartphone?
Right. I think now with like Apple Pay and everything else that you can just show your phone and pay for stuff. And your credit cards are in there.
Right.
And I just did that a few days ago.
Right. And that brings me to my next point. If you do have, an unfortunate loss or theft of your smartphone, make sure that you go, think about what accounts are connected to your phone, your email, your online banking, all those, your PayPal. Certainly if you have Apple Pay, you need to go and change all those passwords because I don't know how it is for you. If you have access to my phone, it'll plug you right into my email, no password required, and then that can plug you into every piece of information that's on my email, right?
But most now the phones will have a password just to get into it.
Right.
How easy is that to hack?
So it depends, right? So and some people don't even set it up. At least I'm not sure. In my generation, there's a lot of people that don't even take the time to do that. And so the PIN code is the best one. But then there's also the thumbprint, the thumbprint or the swipe, the pattern swipe. Definitely choose whichever option you like best. Definitely have one of them up there. The PIN code is usually the hardest to crack. But understand that even that, if it's a determined thief, all that's going to do is buy you time to wipe the information that you have there. So online and internet experience, this kind of jumps off what we're talking about. When you're using websites for financial transactions, whether you're paying bills online, whether you're shopping, whether you're managing your financial accounts, have an understanding that that information is valuable. So make sure that, most of us when we shop online, you see the URL, the address bar at the top there. Make sure that HTTP in that URL address bar has an S, which stands for secure. Most of the modern web browsers will have like a little green padlock there to inform you that that's what that means is that's an encrypted portal, right? If you don't see that, that means that when you send out that credit or debit information, that's going out into cyberspace and anybody with the capability to look at that can see that. And then there are also areas beyond your control. People ask me a lot, well, what's the one thing I can do to make sure that I don't, ever have to deal with identity theft? And unfortunately, I have to tell them, well, there is no, end all be all perfect firewall where, you just set up this thing and then you never have to worry about it. So, data breaches, most of you are probably familiar with that stuff in the news now as well. The Office for Personnel Management, the federal government with some of the best encryption in the world, just had a major breach not 2 months ago. It happens to major companies, Target. Sony, Heartland. Major institutions that invest. And by the way, they're not being negligent, right? They invest real money in data encryption and server protection and firewalls and all that stuff. But the problem is the internet at its basic function is designed to share information, right? So you can try and build these bubbles of safe space on the internet, but ultimately a hacker is going to have an advantage, a good hacker.
And then everything is going cloud-based and so on and so forth. So
and that information is only as secure as the encryption system protecting it. So, now I'm sure I hope I haven't scared any of your listeners too badly. They go, well, what do I do? The best thing, if you can take it to some very simple takeaways, be proactive. Do not be an ostrich. Don't put your head in the sand, and understand that for most of us, with identity theft, we have to kind of become our own our own private investigator, right? So no one is going to care as much about protecting your information as you are. So be proactive. Order credit reports regularly.
So there's also, I heard with credit reports, like freecreditreport.com or something like that, that's basically maybe a ploy to get some information. So where do you go?
Right. So the information we have up there is actually the free site, annualcreditreport.com. That's the 3-in-1 marketplace that all of the credit bureaus use. So understand that under federal law, under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you are entitled to one free credit report from each of the 3 major credit reporting agencies per year. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion are required by law, if you request it, to give you a free credit report every year. But there's no law that says that they can't try and turn a profit, which is where you get the freecreditreport.com sites. There's a whole for-profit industry that's built up around that.
Because then they take that and then they send it.
It's a middleman essentially
to
where
the credit cards or something like
exactly.
that. Right?
Well, and then the other thing that is included in those paid requests that's not included in the free ones is the actual FICO score. But as a victim of identity theft, the FICO score itself is not as important as how it got there. Right. So when I tell victims of identity theft to review their credit report, it's not because you can have a victim of identity theft who's got an 800 credit score or a victim of identity theft who's got a 300 credit score. What matters is the account and inquiry history. How did that score get accumulated? Right. Do you recognize all those accounts? Are you just really, irresponsible with your credit and you've got a low credit score because you're late on paying a bunch of bills? Okay. On the other hand, you could have an identity thief who steals your information, opens a new line of credit, and then pays runs it up and then pays the minimum payment every month. And that may or may not bring down your credit score too far, depending on your personal finances. But so that's important to note is, there are a bunch of for-profit services that you can pay for, including credit monitoring, identity monitoring, and all that. But understand that under federal law, you have a right to 3 credit reports and a 90-day fraud alert every year for free. So credit freezes, this is one of the strongest measures to protect against financial identity theft. A credit freeze essentially does exactly what it sounds like. It freezes that Social Security number for all new credit requests. So it won't affect anything that's already existing, your existing lines of credit, anything that you already are responsible for. But any new lines of credit, that's going to freeze it completely so that nobody, at least on the financial side, now that won't stop government or criminal identity theft, but on the financial side, it'll prevent anybody from opening new lines of credit.
All right. So I'm a victim. What's the steps here?
Right. So shameless plug. Step number 1, contact the Identity Theft Resource Center. We'll assign you a victim advisor that will walk you through everything for free. That's if you feel like you need help. Otherwise,
I would say that most people probably would want to contact someone, though.
Well, and that's why our organization exists, is because we understand that, having to talk to, if you're a victim of identity theft, you have to talk to 15 different people or 15 different organizations, and it can be confusing and scary. And so that's really why we exist, is we'll get you some free assistance with, some of the most experienced victim advisors in the industry. But beyond that, you want to contact the credit reporting agencies. Get updated copies of your credit report for the reason that we just talked about, right? You want to be able to review your credit history, and what you're looking for are accounts, inquiries, which are requests for credit that you don't recognize, that you look at and you go, I didn't do that. Why is that on my credit report? A fraud alert, that's another anti-fraud measure like a credit freeze. It's not quite as strong as a credit freeze in that it doesn't just shut down the number completely. It attempts to basically add an extra verification step, right? But the advantage of that is if you are someone who needs your ability to acquire credit, right? If you're a student who's about to apply for college loans in 3 months, a credit freeze is going to be really inconvenient for you, because when you fill out your FAFSA and they try and run your credit worthiness for any sort of loan, right? A credit freeze will prevent them from even looking at a credit file. So a fraud alert is sort of a middle road where it adds an extra step for verification. So it is an anti-fraud, anti-identity theft measure, but it's more convenient in that it sets up a secure PIN number so that when you request a new line of credit or a new service, the credit bureau requests that PIN number from you, and if you give them that PIN number, it goes through as any normal credit request would. So it's a little bit more convenient, not quite as strong as a credit freeze, But if you're in that place in your life where you need your ability to acquire credit, that's sort of a middle road option. And then file a police report. That's really important because that invokes all your protections under federal law. So if you go to, a creditor, let's say Visa, and you say, you have a credit card in my name that I never opened and it's identity theft, right? If they want to work with you and put you through to their fraud people and start doing that resolution, great. But understand that until you have a police report, they're not obligated to. So you're kind of living and dying on their goodwill, right? If they decide that, well, it's your information, you have to pay for it, without a police report, you don't have any legal protection there. So a police report requires them to do an investigation, gives them 30 days to come back to you with a determination. So a police report, yes, in a perfect world, we all want to catch the bad guy, right? That's important too. But understand that even if the bad guy is never found, even if all they do is issue you the report and then never touch it again, that still has huge, huge value for an identity theft victim.
Yeah, I would imagine that they probably are never. I mean, most cases they're probably never found. Or how well is the police?
It does happen. Yeah, it does happen. So the essential problem, it's not that the police are inept. It's that this crime often transcends traditional jurisdictional boundaries, right? We in this country have a 19th century jurisdictional law enforcement system where our jurisdictions are divided into local municipalities, counties, states, federal, right? So what is San Diego PD going to do, for example, if your identity theft victim is in Georgia, right? There's not a lot that they can do. They'll issue you the report, but they don't, or if it's a scam, it might be in another country where U.S. law enforcement has no jurisdiction. So even though identity theft oftentimes leaves a paper trail that someone who's looking could follow, it transcends jurisdictional boundaries. So, in fact, that's how when I talk to my victims, I tell them sometimes, if they have an identity theft victim or an identity thief who's operating in their same jurisdiction, I'm like, congratulations, you got an amateur. We might actually be able to catch this one.
Right. And then, how often, because with me it happened where I knew the person.
Right.
So that very well could happen to
and
maybe a coworker or something.
Right.
Hey, you
and it
see
happens.
something in your
it
drawer,
does happen.
or
even family members.
Sure.
It does happen, unfortunately, where about 20% of the time it's somebody somebody you're close to. So filing a police report just goes a long way to establishing your credibility in the minds of whoever you might have to dispute fraudulent transactions with, right? Whether it be law enforcement or whether it be a government agency or any sort of merchant or creditor or financial institution. Having a police report shows them that you're serious about your status as a victim and invokes all your protections under federal consumer laws like the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So it's an important step. And then once you have that, like I just mentioned and sort of alluded to, you want to contact those merchants directly and dispute the accounts with them. A lot of times we get confusion where, I'll have a victim say, well, I called and disputed with Equifax. Understand that the credit reporting agencies are, at their basic functionality, just data aggregators, right? All they are is collecting data from all these sources and putting it into some sort of one convenient stockpile where it can be accessed by whoever needs to access it, whether it be a financial institution or the consumer or whoever else. So if you dispute, a fraudulent Visa bill, we'll go back to that example. If you dispute a fraudulent Visa bill with Equifax, Equifax is just going to turn around and ask Visa, hey, Visa, is this a legitimate account? And Visa is going to go, as far as we know it is. And then Equifax is going to go, sorry, dispute denied, right? So you want to make sure that, and that's really why the credit report is valuable, is the credit report will show you who you need to be interacting with to clean up the fraud, right? So it'll show you, okay, I've got a Nordstrom store card. I need to be filing a dispute with Nordstrom's. Okay, I've got a Countrywide home loan. I need to be filing a dispute with Countrywide. And then report the crime to the Federal Trade Commission. That will get you in a federal registry of victims. And, in a macro sense, it's important because, that is one of the primary repositories for identity theft statistics and information. So, when a congressman 5 years from now gets ready to make a new identity theft law, that's going to be the information and statistics that they're going to draw from. And then, like I mentioned, I kind of already alluded, order your credit reports.
How often? So at least once a year, right?
Yeah. What I usually recommend for just concerned consumers who don't want to pay for their credit reports, don't want to pay for credit monitoring, as far as they know, aren't victims of identity theft, but just want to be, like we mentioned, responsible, proactive consumers. What I recommend is you stagger them so there's 3 major credit reporting agencies, and you're entitled to 1 free credit report from each of them per year. So stagger them out. Order one from Equifax, then 4 months later, Experian, 4 months later, TransUnion, and then you never have to pay. If you are actually a victim at that point, I recommend that you order all three at the same time because you want to get a comprehensive site picture.
So where you guys come into play is actually when there's a victim.
So we do.
We're doing education now,
yeah, exactly.
right?
So
to hopefully
sides.
just here's the things that you just want to be smart with.
Absolutely.
And then, God forbid, something happens.
You can call us
now.
Exactly. So yeah, it's twofold. We do believe in education as a means of lowering the rates of identity theft. A proactive, educated consumer is a tougher target than somebody who doesn't know, how it works or how their information is used or shared. An informed consumer is a tougher target. So we do that side, and we do it through a variety of ways, from our website to coming on shows like this, and that's why we appreciate being here. And then we also have the call center. If you are a victim, you can call us and get some free assistance.
Final thought. So like there's other I guess companies that charge to monitor the credit.
Right.
Is there good, bad, ugly there?
Yeah, I mean, it's like every other industry, right? There's some really bright, shining, sterling actors, and then there's some more seedy actors, depending on who you talk about. But it does have value. So, and credit monitoring and identity monitoring, even though they sound the same, are actually related but different services. So, credit monitoring is just you're paying for somebody else to passively monitor your credit reports, and they notify you the minute anything changes, right? Could be an address, could be an inquiry, could be contact information. Anytime something changes on one of your credit files, you're notified, usually within 24 hours. Now, the value of that is because every study that we've seen, whether it's Government Accountability Office, whether it's the Federal Trade Commission, shows that the longer it takes you to realize that you are a victim of identity theft, the damage goes up, right? The amount of financial damage, the amount of hours you have to spend mitigating it, all that goes up. So the value there is the passive monitoring. At least with basic credit monitoring, it's not giving you any information that you couldn't get by proactively checking your credit report for free. But the advantage is even a proactive consumer, maybe you check your credit once a month, right? That's still a 30-day window potentially for an identity thief to operate in. That passive monitoring is valuable because it gives you real-time notification that something changed on your credit report. So that's the value. And then identity monitoring is, even one step beyond that, where they'll not only monitor your credit file, but they'll monitor, state and federal, criminal databases. They'll monitor a variety of databases to tell you when something changes, outside of just what's going on your credit file financially.
Great information, Matt. That's Matt Davis, Identity Theft Resource Center. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, to educate our clients to figure out, hopefully, education's key, right?
It really is.
Just simple things that you can potentially do to, there's a lot of things that are out of our control,
sure.
But there's simple steps that you can take to mitigate the likelihood of being a victim.
To make it much less likely, and also in the event that it does happen, to make it a smaller event, lower dollar damage, lower time wasted, things like that.
If you want more information on the Identity Theft Resource Center, there's the number 888-400-5530 or idtheftcenter.org. Again, that's Matt Davis. Want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please let us know how we can help you. If you have any questions on anything at all, we're here to help. Hopefully you found this valuable. And if you could go to purefinancial.com, give us your input to see what else that you want us to throw out in regards to information and education. We will do that for you. Hopefully you found this informative. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And we'll, or wonderful weekend, I guess have a wonderful day. I mean, you're going to watch this whenever you want. So, all right. Thanks again.